My name is Hunter Dwaron. I will be teaching on morality. I am a college student at Fran U studying theology. So to dive right into morality and what it means, what we think of when, as Catholics, we say morality and how to be moral. It starts off with freedom. It starts off with understanding what it means to have freedom as Catholics, as Christians, as children of God. And so we know that we have this gift of free will, and that allows us to choose between right and wrong. We know what's right and wrong, and we are able to choose it. And so freedom, though, in a deeper sense, in a more theological sense, it's freedom that allows us to choose what is good. So just because I can choose whatever I want to some extent, that doesn't mean that I really have freedom. If I choose to smoke, then eventually I will have less freedom over my choice of smoking because I'll become addicted to it. Things of the world can become addicting, and the temptation for it can take away our freedom. So true freedom is freedom that liberates from that temptation. It's freedom that allows us to always be able to choose what is good, what is best for us, for our bodies, for our heart, for our soul, and for our relationship with God ultimately. And so understanding freedom then allows us now, how can we put that into action? How can we make those free choices to choose what is good? And so as the lesson lays out, some virtues and vices. Virtues being the things that are habitual and a firm disposition to do good, as the Catechism defines it. And so what that means, what the Catechism is saying there, is that a virtue is something that is a habit. It's a habit you have. It's something that you do consistently, and that it's almost your second nature to go for it. And it's a good thing. Not all habits are bad. It's a good thing that you might have a habit of opening the door for the person behind you. But there are vices as well to always be aware of, which are bad habits to some extent. So drinking might be a bad habit that you have, drinking excessively and things like that, depending on your age. And so, well, they're all kids, so drinking, bad. Well, okay, cut it at that. Okay, anyway. And so the four cardinal virtues that the lesson plan lays out are prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. And you may have heard some of these words before, you may not have. So I'm going to go through each one. So prudence, if you've heard of it before, you might think that it has something to do with just being passive and laid back and reserved. But in a deeper sense, it means that allowing every single moment to be a chance to choose what is good. Then every moment you sit back and you think through it, and you think about how can you choose to do what is good? How can I use my freedom to choose what is good? And so prudence means thinking that through, thinking each moment through. So thinking through, if there's someone behind you, open the door for them. Thinking through that if someone is struggling, if you see a friend or somebody else on the side looking down and looking sad, thinking through and saying, maybe that person needs a little joy, it needs a smile in their life to help them through to something. So seeing those moments and taking them as opportunities to choose what's good. And the next one being justice. And so the Catechism will say that that's giving God and your neighbor their due. And so justice, we think of, you do good, you get good, do bad, you get bad. But we know that bad things happen to good people. We know that good things happen to bad people, even when they don't deserve it. And justice, in a virtue sense, just means being able to live your life as you should in relation to others, and that you can give them what you know is right. Do what you know is right. You can't control all the world around you. You can't control everything that might be unjust around you. But you can control your own justice, and you can control your own mercy that you give to people as well, and showing compassion. And then also there's fortitude. Fortitude is firmness in pursuing that good. So even though you might know what's good, even though you have the free will to choose what's good, even if you have the prudence to think it through and you know that you should do this, there's still that step you have to take in order to actually go and do it and put it into action. And that's where fortitude comes in. And it's a virtue that takes time to build. And you have to become, once you become comfortable with your faith, once you become comfortable with knowing what is right and not worrying about those things, that how you might look doing what the right thing is to others, then you will be able to find fortitude, and you will be able to find how you can enact your freedom in what is good. And then finally, there's temperance. In temperance, the word I like to think of with temperance is balance. Our whole life needs balance. And if we're doing something that might be good, but we're doing it too much, so eating is good. But if we're eating tons and it gets to the point of gluttony, then we're out of balance and we're not following temperance. And so temperance is a great virtue for practical reasons as well, that it will allow you to better live your life in a healthy way, physically and also spiritually. Because then you learn that the things of this world, like food, so eating too much, isn't what's going to really satisfy you. You realize that what you need more of is a stronger relationship with God. And that is what you can set your mind to. And so the 4 vices that go with those 4 cardinal virtues, prudence, so the vice that goes with that is folly. Folly just means foolishness, means rash decisions. It means not thinking things through. It means that, like I was saying earlier, if you're seeing someone on the side that's sad, that you don't even think through helping them or not. You get so focused on your own ways that you forget about them and you forget about others around you. So justice, the opposite, the vice, would obviously be injustice. And so think of that as almost like being cruel to others, as not giving them what they deserve as human beings. And so that, in a sense, is cruel. People deserve your best. And like I said before, you can give that to them. In every moment, you can give your best to someone. You can give what they deserve as human beings, with dignity and respect. So fortitude, the opposite vice, would be cowardice. As I was saying before, fortitude being firm, courageous in your faith, and cowardice being weak, but also, in a sense, it's letting others have control. It's not standing up and using your own freedom. It's giving others that freedom that you have. It's throwing it away and giving it to them and letting them decide how you live, because you're almost scared to make that step for yourself. And so, finally, temperance, the opposite would be intemperance. And again, that would be living unbalanced. It would mean having possible health concerns in a practical sense, but also spiritually, deep down, you're not aligning what needs to be most important, which is God. You're allowing other things to take control of that and to take God's place in your life. And so you're out of balance. And also, you can also see this, for your friends and your family, if you're not spending enough time with them, if you're spending too much time with yourself, if you're focusing, as you learn to time manage, you might find yourself struggling with imbalances in how you spend your time. And as we continue on, the theological virtues that we all have heard and we know of: faith, hope, and love. And so faith means believing in God. It means deeper trusting in God, that you believe that God is who He is, and so you can trust that He's there with you and He's there for you. He made us for Him. And so being faithful in our lives, in morality, and how we act, means knowing that God is with us and that He is for us. And as the scripture says, if God is for us, who could be against us? And so it's remembering that and putting that into action. Hope, the next one, means desiring God. And desiring God in the point of optimism. Being optimistic that even though whenever you face rough patches, when you face down times in your life, you're optimistic that you can learn from it and that you can find God in it. even when it seems so bad, you remember that Jesus suffered as well, that his suffering was meant to free us from our suffering, and we can turn to it and pray for his strength that he had through his suffering to allow it to help us as well. And finally, love. St. Paul says that love is the greatest of all of these. Another word is charity, that's often used with love. And so I like the word charity because when we think of charity, we think of helping the poor. We think of helping and putting it into action. And that's what love is. Love is taking all of these virtues and putting it all together in action. And it binds it all together, as the Catechism will say. That love, if you follow these virtues, you're following love. And that's why it's the greatest of all of these. And because God is love, and God is that perfect love that all of these virtues help us strive towards. And I'll touch on the three vices that these theological virtues theological virtues counter. So the first one against faith would be apostasy. That's a word that just means denying the faith. And it can be a formal denial of the faith that you might see in church history if you're learning about that. But also in everyday lives, it can have its own little moments where you don't recognize God, or you choose not to think about God and not to focus on God, and not trusting in him and believing in him. Hope, the opposite would be despair. And that's a pretty logical, it makes sense. It's an obvious vice that goes with hope, that if you're not hopeful, you're despairing, you're saddened, you're almost desperate for what can lead you through your life. And that can lead to pessimism. It can lead to you not seeing the joy in life. It can lead down a sad road. And I think we all would want to choose a happier, more joyful time. And even though not all the times are like that, can't all be happy or joyful, but I think if bad things ever do start to happen, being able to find hope, being able to find something that gets you through it and allows you to be optimistic is better than just falling into despair and losing trust and faith in God and hope in God in this case. And finally, with love, the vice that goes with it that St. John Paul II will say, the opposite of love is indifference. Mm-hmm. That indifference meaning that you don't have any emotion, that you're not showing any concern for anything. That at least if you're showing concern negatively, at least you're showing concern, at least you're passionate about something, even if it is negative. Because you can use those negative passions, you can point them towards the good, that you're still passionate, and that's still there. And they can be pointed towards the good and towards love. But if nothing is there, if you've become indifferent and you lose all emotion over something, over maybe your family or maybe your friend or even God, then you have to start from the very fundamental aspect of love and rebuild that foundation. And we need to have hope and we need to have faith that we can do that. But it takes God stepping into allowing him to step into our lives to be able to bring back that love. So, in conclusion, I'd like to leave you on a more joyful note that we've been talking about, yes, the virtues, but also the vices and being real about the temptations that we have in our lives. So, be comforted in knowing who God is. God is all that which is good. God is there for you. God is everything that is good. That is him. He is there with you, even in the bad times, because you can have hope and you can believe that he will get you out of there and remain optimistic. So be comforted in knowing that as you go out your life trying to be moral, that God is there with you. And also, the title of this course is Grow in Virtue, Root Out Vice. And so what it means to live in morality, what that means, how to grow in virtue, and how to root out vice, I'll leave you with this, is that you do your best each and every day, and each and every moment, you do your best, and you live each and every moment to find God. You try to find where God is. Always be reminded, where is God? How is He here? That is what morality is. It's looking for God. We don't always know all the answers. We don't always do what's best. But if we know that this is a search, we're searching for Him, we're looking for Him, we're doing our best, then we can be comforted to know that He will be there, He will help us, He will forgive us when we fall, but He will also be joyful when we succeed.